I hope I'm audible enough. Maybe if you could, those I can see can wave that they can hear me, I'll be happy to proceed. Thank you, thank you. Let me start off by saying, because I'm just doing a very brief opening remarks, that this topic that we are having today is quite dear to us as the members of the profession who basically oversee this very important juncture of any project. And we have two very interesting speakers who themselves have been on both sides of the line, whether they have been there as regulators or as the regulated, and vice versa. And we personally, each one of us have had a situation where the point at which the project needs to move on, and it's a very important point where either you will get paid or the project will succeed and move on to create jobs for other people, or it will stall for a very long time. And we've had our various interesting experiences, and it's a common belief by most of the professionals that there is some sort of intentional snag or some sort of inertia to move projects onto the next level. And I think what we are starting off today is not really a conclusive discussion on what needs to be done or how things need to be done, but rather start to see how do we then move things forward. And that's why we intentionally invited these speakers who can actually say are very, very well versed with this topic, and are also in a very good position to influence some sort of change, or should we say acceleration of the process. So as you know, we at the chapter are trying as much as possible to make it easier both for the profession but also for our members who are submitting drawings to be able to move forward. And this is why the AAK pushed the agenda of going digital, because the main, basically, how do we avoid the human influence, which generally has been pointed at when it comes to the issues of not moving the process. And we hope that the two speakers will shed light, not necessarily give, the solutions, but at least shed light to the experiences, and we can all feel free to ask questions. I know most of you guys, our members, they are very tough, hard questions. But please, if you don't get answered, just be happy. I'm also here just to get, I would wish I could ask the tough questions, but yes, that's why we are here, all of us, just to get a very good feel of where we are at and how we are moving forward. So let me take this opportunity to invite our president, Mogure Njendu, to give our remarks, and then to invite the next speaker. Mogure, are you ready? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Actor Tarabu, for that introduction. For me, it's just really to just, well, firstly, to welcome all the AAK members and colleagues in the industry and anybody who's a stakeholder to this session. And to say, of course, Happy New Year. This is our first webinar of the year. 2020 was definitely a challenging year for the industry as a whole. I think we have learned a lot. We have had to build quite a bit of resilience and to appreciate the fact that we're jumping off the year quickly and with such a pertinent topic to our industry. It's really the bread and butter of our industry in terms of development control and what we do and how we get money into our pockets. So to appreciate the Architects chapter really for holding this first webinar so aptly and such a relevant topic. And of course to the AAK Secretariat for organizing this with such speed and with such great speakers. The speakers that will be here today, both Planaga Timu, Architect President Wawero Gadesha. I mean, they are really speakers who can speak to this topic quite well. And we're looking forward to hearing from them. I will encourage members who are on the session, please do post questions and answers in the Q&A section. Lina will be posting from the Secretariat, will be posting the hashtags we'll be using today. So we encourage you also to tweet and to make this a very interactive session. So again, from AAK, we appreciate all the members who have remained engaged with us. there's a lot of work to be done in the industry, and every member who shows up to a session like this is part of being providing solutions, because as much as we have problems, we also want to focus on solutions and outcomes from these conversations. So karibuni sana, and with those few remarks, I hand over to the chapter chair. Florence, thank you so much. Asante.
Thank you so much, Madam President, and good evening to everybody, and a happy new year to all of us. This is a unique year in the sense that we're actually able to hold an event right at the beginning of the year. And we thank the Secretariat specifically for giving us this opportunity as a chapter to quickly put something together and be able to discuss the issues that are affecting us. So from the Architects chapter, we invite all of you and we thank you so much for joining us this evening. And we really also want to appreciate all the panelists, the two speakers we will be having this evening, as well as the participants in the audience who could be AAK members or non-members, all those stakeholders who are engaged and part of the construction industry who've joined us this evening. We thank all of you for making time to attend this particular session. This afternoon, or this evening, our intention was to have a discussion regarding something that is becoming an ongoing concern with regards to development control and enforcement. And this is just on the backdrop of having some amendments being made to the Nca Act, which began with the Business Laws Amendment Act in 2020. Which granted NTA some powers. We've also seen, of course, the change of guard from the planning section of the Nairobi City County government moving to the Nairobi Metropolitan Services. We also know that there's been, some more amendments to try and give NCA some powers to enforce some of the issues that we are seeing in terms of compliance to in development. But we've also seen that there's a big differentiation, a big challenge in ensuring that there's a proper differentiation of roles between national and county governments. So in this case, at what point does the county government role and the national government role, at what point do they merge, and at what point are they separate or differentiated? And therefore, we think it's important that we begin to unpack this as well. And over the recent past, we've also seen that county governments have embraced electronic systems in order to, provide a smooth way of doing business, but more so to ensure that development control is done in a more seamless way. Of course, we know Nairobi pioneered this, and believe it or not, the two gentlemen who will be speaking to us are actually the two people who are in charge of this, and they spearheaded it to ensure that it's successful, becoming the first ever electronic system within the region, not only in Kenya. And of course, we've seen Mombasa, Kisumu, Kiambu, and Kajiado following suit. But of course, there are many challenges that we've seen with that. So we also want to bring forth what could be the challenge. This is a system that came in, almost 10 years now. We are counting 10 years now. What can we do better to ensure that even as we move forward, there are things that we need to start looking at and maybe changing the system, updating the system over and above just creating new laws. There are other things that we need to do regarding the same. And then all in all, we hope that we'll be able to have a conversation around the same. So without much further ado, I will be inviting the speakers to converse, basically. We will not be a very tough discussion. It will be more of a candid conversation, really, between Architect Waweru and Tana Gatimu on these elements that I have pointed out. And let me just take a quick opportunity to introduce our speakers, and I will start with Architect Waweru Gadecha, and I'll briefly just introduce him. Architect Waweru Gadecha is a well-known gentleman to us. As you all know, he's been the past president and past chairman of the Architectural Association of Kenya, and I dare say the only one to have held both positions at the same time. During his tenure, he led AAK in the acquisition of its first ever owned secretariat office, and we successfully moved in February 2017. Also during his tenure, and one of the reasons why we are very happy to have him on board is that alongside the IFC, he led the development and launch of Kenya's first electronic construction permit management system for the then City Council of Nairobi, working together with the other speaker, Planner David Gatimu. He's a registered architect with Borax, a fellow member of AAK Architects Chapter, and is also a chartered member of RIBA, the Royal Institute of British Architects, since the year 2000. In the past, he has been a board member of Borax, a council member of the AUA, that's the African Union of Architects, a council member of the International Union of Architects representing our region, that's Region 5 in Africa, a governor in the Kenya Private Sector Alliance, co-chairing the Land and Housing Sector Board, and a member of the Governing Council of AAK. He has served in various capacities in the practice of architecture within and without the region. That includes serving in Borax, in the East African Institute of Architects, in the AQRB, that is in Tanzania, the Commonwealth Association of Architects, as well as in ISOCAP, among many other things that he has done for the profession. Over and above that, Waweru is currently pursuing a Master of Arts in Planning at the University of Nairobi and holds a postgraduate diploma in architectural practice from De Montfort University, as well as a diploma in architecture in the University of Nottingham, as well as a Bachelor of Arts in Architecture also from the University of Nottingham. Karibu sana Bwana Waweru to our session. I'll also introduce Planner Gatimu to you, who is also very well known to us and a very active member of the association. So Planner David Gatimu is a registered urban planner with an MSc in urban planning from Oxford Brookes University, a corporate member of the Town Planners Chapter, TPC, of the AAK, and a corporate member of TISPAC, that is Town and County Planners Association of Kenya, and a former member of the Physical Planners and Registration Board. Mr. Gatimu is also a member of ISOCAP. He has over 25 years experience in public service and took early retirement in 2017 after serving his last posting as the Chief Officer of Land, Housing and Physical Planning Sector in Kiambu County Government. That is from May 2014 to November 2017. Prior to this, Planner Gatimu worked with the then City Council of Nairobi, now the Nairobi City County Government, rising through the ranks to the post of Assistant Director in the City Planning Department and responsible for urban design and development from 2005 to 2009. And development control from 2009 to 2014 before moving to Kiambu. During his time, he was at the forefront of implementation of urban design schemes in the city, such as pedestrianization of parts of Nairobi CBD, erection of monuments, street furniture, decent informal trading spaces, and also driving the reform agenda to automate development application processes. And he oversaw the successful development and operationalization of the web-based platform for the issuance of planning and construction permits Nairobi City County in 2012 and in Kiambu in 2016. So he's actually been at the forefront of two systems that we as practitioners are really using them day in and day out to push applications. So he has also had special assignments in 2018 and 2020. He was appointed by the CS for lands and physical planning to serve in the task force 1 and 2 respectively, and was tasked with formulating regulations for the electronic land transactions, registration, conveyancing, and other related activities under the Land Registration Act of 2012 and the Land Act 2020, as well as the Community Land Act in 2016. Currently, he's serving as a member of KPDA Task Force on Affordable Housing. Planner Gatimu is the founder and CEO of Salute Spatial Solutions that specializes in town planning, urban design, land development, and planning advocacy. He has been carrying out assignments with the UN Habitat in supporting selected counties in urban development management and developing the guidebook on managing infrastructure development through physical land use planning processes in Kenya. Karibu sana, Planner Gatimu. So I will
Thank you very much.
Karibu sana. So I'll take it over to Architect Roy to start us off, and Pranagatimi, you can feel free to interject or converse with him on anything that he will mention that you feel like you need to interject. But I will give you about 20 minutes, Architect Roy, to proceed and give us your thoughts on the conversation that we have begun. I also maybe did not mention that Waweru is the managing partner at Waweru and Associates Architect. Karibu sana, Architect Waweru.
Thank you, Chair of Architects Chapter, AAK. Good afternoon, everyone. I think you can all hear me.
Yes, we can.
Thank you. So, as I said, good afternoon, everyone, and happy to be here at the first AAK Architects Chapter event 2021. Grateful for you to have organized this event and to have chosen what I would say an appropriate subject via which we can launch our calendar of activities this year. Good afternoon, my friend and professional colleague, David Gatimu, my friend of many years and personal friend and also professional friend. We've done many things together and we still work together even as we speak today in January. I will speak, I think I've been invited, not because of all those things that Florence said. I think I've been invited to speak here today because of my involvement with the National Construction Authority. Just to share with those who are in this call, I presently sit on the board of the National Construction Authority, and I presently chair the technical committee of the board. So that perhaps affords me an inside view of some of the things that we want to discuss today. I think, as Florence and Mogore have said, it's very much a discussion. It's just a discussion between two gentlemen, but a discussion between the rest of us. All of us have something useful to say and to add to this subject. The matter before us is development control and enforcement. Now, I think development control is known to all of us, and I'll allow Bwana Gatimo to define it better because he's the ranking planner in this discussion. But I think we're also talking about a component of enforcement, and in both of those, electronic involvement, electronic tools, how can we be more efficient? How can we do this job better? How can we do it more efficiently in terms of business and so on and so forth? Now, the reason why I've bothered to introduce my NCA background is so that I can go straight to discussing NCA by way of introduction, and then tell you what is happening in NCA right now as regards the building code, as regards the Business Laws Amendment Act of 2020, and so on and so forth. Now, I'll for the purpose of those of us who may not know who NCA is, a quick introduction. NCA was established or is established under the National Construction Authority Act number 41 of 2011, which came into effect in June 2011. We are established for three key functions. If I summarize them as follows, we have a regulatory function. So we are the regulator of contractors. Previous to the formation of NCA, there was no legal regulator. Contractors were registered or known, were registered, let's say, administratively in the then Ministry of Works, what is now the State Department for Public Works, etc., etc. So that's a regulatory function we have. So any contractor who's doing any shape and form of works in Kenya can only legally do it if he has a registration and license from NCA. We have a second principal function as capacity building and training. Capacity building is capacity building amongst contractors, amongst the workers on contractor side, so the skilled workers and the supervisors, so site supervisors. So we'll train contractors, we will train skilled workers, and we will train site supervisors. Not only will we train them, we'll also accredit them. So on any construction site, in our capacity building and training mandates, we will want to see that the contractor is properly registered. And so there's a legal process through which they will have gone. They'll be on the Nca register. Of course, many of you will know you can find all that information on our website. Each site must have skilled workers. Those are persons of known competence. You have trained, your competency has been assessed. And so if you're a mason, then you have an Nca card with you, showing that you're an accredited worker. And in Nca, we have 58 trades that we've defined, specializations or specialisms in construction. And construction here is across buildings, dams, roads. It's civil, it's building, it's everything. So if you're doing electrical installations, they should have an Nca card saying as much. If you're doing anything HVAC, if you're doing tiling, if you're glazing, boiler, etc., etc. So those trades have been defined by Nca. We work closely with Nca and other equivalent organizations just to make sure that the service that is being provided to the public, to society, is of known competence. Our last broad role is advisory. We advise principally the Cabinet Secretary, and by the Cabinet Secretary, of course, it'll be the Cabinet Secretary in our line ministry. I think you all know which is our line ministry. And by advising our Cabinet Secretary, then we're advising governments at large, but also providing advice to other stakeholders. Anybody who was interested in construction in Kenya, its place, its outlook, its history, should be able to come to Nca and get whatever assistance and information they require. So that's with regard to who Nca is. I'm happy to flesh out a lot more as we move along. The subject today is, as I said, is development control and enforcement. Now, Nca has a role in development control, and the definition of development control, as I said, is fairly broad. But and as I said, I'll defer to Gatimu on this here. But let me just read the definition of development control that I will be referring to as we go ahead. And it's a process geared towards ensuring that development applications comply not only with approved physical development plans, but also with policy guidelines, planning regulations, and standards as defined via various policy instruments, local authority bylaws, relevant statutes, etc., etc. It also involves implementation of the approved plans and enforcement of bylaws and regulations to guarantee orderly, sustainable, and environmentally friendly built a natural environment. Now, you could have many broader definitions, but key here is guided development that is within the law, that produces sustainable and environmentally sound environments. If you talk buildings, you know, what is the minimum habitable standard, etc., etc. So Nca, as I said, was created on the back of many things in Kenya to do the things that I mentioned. What is Nca's role in development control? As I said, we are the registrar of contractors, and so we have a compliance function. We have 3 key departments in Nca, but 2 of them are mainly dealing with the technical matters in front of us. We have project registration and we have compliance. Under compliance is where we have quality assurance. Now, quality assurance is where the rubber meets the road, and that is where you have Nca officers on the ground going out there and checking on sites and ensuring that there is, or we are playing our role as regards development control. Our powers are limited, and we'll flesh that out as we go along. But those are the 2 key areas. So we have project registration and we have quality assurance. And project registration is really a compliance check. We are making sure that all projects, and it is a requirement of the law, by the way, that no site or no works on projects, any construction projects will commence before they have an NCA compliance certificate. What are we checking when we are registering a project? We are checking that you have a registered contractor. You know the categories, NCA 1 or NCA 8 all the way to 1, with NCA 1 being able to do works of unlimited value. NCA 8 is the lowest categories entry. So you must have a registered contractor, and NCA is the registrar of the contractors. You must have qualified professionals at a minimum. And even on small size projects, you must have an architect and engineer, of course, registered with their respective boards. And then we are checking that you have all development permissions. You have approval from a county government, that is your PPA2, where relevant, you have an EIA license. If you're proximate to water, then you have been through Water Resources Authority. Basically, we are checking compliance. So we're the last stage before anybody breaks ground to do a project, any construction works. And that applies, as I said, to roads, it applies to buildings, dams, etc., etc. You're not allowed to ask me whether the Nairobi Expressway has a compliance certificate from NCA. So that is project registration. You then get your compliance certificate, and then you can go to site. Now, our compliance officers will come around and will make sure that you are doing what you said you do, that you are following the conditions of the license, and that you are not going outside those conditions. And as I said, those conditions will include having registered consultants, superintending the works, supervising the works. They will check by way of checking the minutes, project documentation, consultant instructions, and so on and so forth. We will check that you have accredited skilled workers. As I said, you've got an electrician who's NCA accredited, if it's a mason, if it's a steel fixer, and so on and so forth. We will check that your supervisor is accredited with a NCA so that he knows what he's looking for. Your supervisor will be your site agent or whatever the terminology you want to use. We will check that not only did you file correct papers, but that those people are actually there and that are doing the job they're supposed to do. As I said, it's quality assurance. We are checking compliance. We're trying to make sure that you are doing what is necessary so that we manifest safe and habitable buildings that are not a danger, that do the job they're supposed to do. We do not issue an occupational certificate, as you know that, just like we do not issue a building permit. So we exist somewhere in between that space. Now, as far as development control goes, that is as much as NCA has done since its formation in 2011. There have been problems, of course. There have been problems that we have found because whereas we may visit a site, your site, any site, my site, and find non-compliance, the maximum we've been able to do is to issue a suspension notice. There are 7 grounds against which a suspension notice can be issued. For those of you who've seen NCA suspension order, they're there. Everything from all of those non-compliance items. But as we've gone along, and as NCA, which is not a very old organization, has found its footing in industry, it was found that there were perhaps some lacunas in the law that created us. Key amongst them being, there was no penalty, there was no legal penalty for those who failed to observe or comply with the NCA requirements. It is the law that you must comply. It is the law that we can come to your site and we can suspend your site. But what happens if you don't comply? What happens if you proceed with works? We were left with the option of then going to look for security forces, go to the nearest. In any case, our suspension orders are copied to the nearest OCS, and that's the police station. Then what? Against what do they charge you? So there's a lacuna somewhere in the law. So I'll discuss that as I come to the Business Laws Amendment Act of 2020. The other key thing was, against what are we checking construction standards? Are we checking construction standards, or are we just checking compliance? So part of that is what the Business Laws Amendment Act 2020 set out to address. First, by giving NCA, by modifying Section 23 of the Nca Act. And so Section 23 now, which is the one that allows us to come onto your site and so on and so forth, it gives us clear rights to undertake mandatory inspections at any time on sites under construction, in accordance with Section 5 of our Act, which is the one that discusses quality assurance. Another key modification of Section 23 is that it now says explicitly, a person who willfully fails to comply with an order of an investigating officer commits an offense and shall be liable on conviction to a fine not exceeding 1 million shillings or imprisonment for a term not exceeding 3 years, or to both. That gives us some teeth now. If you fail to comply with our officers on the ground, then you'll be hauled to court, and there are people already in court, and so on and so forth. So that's one of the key amendments to our Act arising from the Business Laws Amendment Act 2020. The next one is perhaps the one that is more topical. Before the era of, before 2010, the new constitution, we had numerous local governments, municipal authorities, 170 odd, and we had a building code, and it's a building code that we still use today. In many ways, it was adequate, but also in many ways inadequate. I say that because it's a document that has enabled all the buildings within that we're all sitting in right now. So it was, however, limited. It was prescriptive, as opposed to being performance-based. So over many years, and even predating NCA, there were efforts to write a new set of building regulations or building code for Kenya. I was personally involved in many of those efforts 10 years plus ago, but then none of it went anywhere. And, this is Kenya, things happen. Anyway, fast forward to 2019 at some point, and following a cabinet directive to enhance business reforms as an indicator of business efficiency in Kenya, and in conjunction with the World Bank, an Act of Parliament was passed, which culminated into the Business Laws Amendment Act. Amongst the many other pieces of legislation that were modified was the Nca Act, and quite a few sections inside there. Key amongst the modifications, I've talked about Section 23 with a penalty, but the one I'm talking about now is Section 16, which now introduces the building code as regulations made pursuant to Section 42 of our Act. And NCA is now specifically empowered to enforce the prescribed building code in the construction industry. Previously, the building code would have existed or enforced by local governments and other or county governments, but right now it'll be NCA. Now, this is a national document, so it'll be a requirement on everybody to follow the same document. A key difference, as I said, is that it is no longer materials-based, it is performance-based, so that the outer wall of a building is not necessarily masonry. The material you'll use will be the one that'll do the function of keeping out weather, structurally sound, etc., etc. What is a performance requirement of an external wall or an external enclosure? It's not 8-inch thick masonry, and so on and so forth. I think many of you will know the background of that document. So those are two key things, and perhaps that perhaps you'd want to discuss today or hear from me about. And maybe at this point, I'll want to stop and then allow Bwana to say something from the planning and other policy dimensions, so that we can then have a conversation. Thank you, Florence.
Thank you very much, Architect Chawero, and we really appreciate that you set the background upon which we're having this conversation quite aptly. Before we get into you, Planner Gatimu, I just want to recognize members of our profession who are with us this afternoon and for joining us. We have Architect Ida Munano, who's been a long-serving person within the profession through public service. We have Architect Sylvester Muli, who's the current chair of the board of Institution of Architects and Quantity Surveyors. Karibu sana. We have our past president, Architect Emma Miloyo. Karibu sana. Our fellow member and professor, Architect Jerry Magutu. We have also a past chairman of AAK, Architect Steve Oundo, who's with us. Thank you so much. I also want to recognize some colleagues from other fields. We have Planner Judy Gitau, also from NMS, here with us. Thank you so much. Engineer Shama Kiteme from IAK, Architect Juliet Kabere, also from NCA. And we also have people from outside the country, Architect Jonathan Manning from Johannesburg, Karibu sana. And to all our participants, thank you so much for joining us. And we really appreciate your being with us this evening. Planner Gatimu, I'll hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam President, chairpersons of the chapters, the various chapters of the AAK who are present, and all other members. Architect Waweru Gadesha, thank you very much for your able presentation and for the kind words. We've walked a long journey in many ways, and I'm glad to have you here as well. Good evening, one and all. I'm happy to be with you here to discuss about development control, and for all of us who provide or who give towns and cities a character. Yes, cities and towns are like human beings. They have a character. And their character is understood by their distinct identity. Many years ago, we used to say Nairobi was a green city in the sun. I don't know whether it still has that identity. We used to say Nakuru was a cleaner city in Kenya. I wonder whether it still has that identity. Do we really have any town or city in Kenya that has an identity? And these identities are defined by the quality of the environment, the visual appeal, the safety and security, and it has to be 24 hours. We know there are some towns and cities in Kenya. After 7 p.m., things turn around. The efficiency and the quality of the urban services offered by the cities or towns, the ease of mobility, that is for pedestrian and vehicular traffic, the economy, and the social values of the inhabitants. And for any city or town to achieve those qualities or to have that distinctive character, we as the professionals must contribute to a mechanism through which the entire process of urban development and growth is regulated. And we need to appreciate that we are an urbanizing country. When the population census results were out in 2009, the urban population of Kenya stood at 9.5 million. The 2019 census shows that we are approaching 15 million. In 2019, we could be hitting 20 million. And all that translates to this mechanism of development control being functional and operating properly so that these dynamics or the dynamism of the population growth should be framed with great care and abundant caution so that we ensure that all the players are able to do what is required of them. My colleague Waweru has defined development control, but we need to ask ourselves, what are the fundamental elements in achieving development control? I'll just mention three, the very, very basic ones. The first one is we must have a multidisciplinary approach. We here as the practitioners and experts in the built environment, all of us have a stake in development control. The second element is having a collaboration and a coordinating pillar. In the absence of that center pillar, things fall apart. Not a single institution can carry development control on its own. So the third element is having a multi-agency or a shared institutional responsibility. So of these three fundamental elements, let me just quickly run through each. On the multidisciplinary approach, I don't think Kenya has had any shortage of well-trained multiple professionals who have an input in development controls. We have planners at the forefront, we have architects, we have engineers, we have surveyors, we have public health officers, we have environmental experts. The number keeps increasing. Urban designers are around with us, landscape architects, transportation planners and engineers, and so on and so forth. Kenya is well endowed with all this. Little wonder when we have Kenyans in other countries which are having functioning systems, they perform very well. So we need to ask ourselves, of these fundamental elements, what is really failing us in ensuring that we have a functioning development control? On collaboration and the coordination pillar, this pillar is made with components or ingredients that are the heart and the soul of development control. The first component of this is the database. We need to have a strategy. We need to have strategies or database, which is the substance of DC. And Waweru put it very well. We need to operate within an environment of approved policies. We know very well our laws provide very well for urban policies at the national level, at the county level, and even at urban level or municipal levels. We also need to have tools of development control. And the third one is procedures of development control. For this database, we know very well we're in a dispensation where counties, the national government, already we know we have the National Spatial Plan that was launched in 2015. It's a 30-year plan. These are long, mid, and short-term strategies that ensure that development is allowed only where it is needed, while ensuring that the character and amenity of an area is not adversely affected. As for the operating tools, we have things like forms. Waweru mentioned Form PPA 2. We also have various forms. Planners in the house here know them. And it's unfortunate when forms were being designed in the repealed Physical Planning Act, the forms for architects were not there. And I'm glad under PLUPA, these are being considered and they're going to be there. We also have registers, invoices, procedure operating manuals, circulars, and so on and so forth. And the third, under that category, we have operating procedures for development applications, or operating procedures for development control, right from the pre-application level, where practitioners have to access or have consultations with documents that guide the kind of development they're about to apply for. We also have pre-approval requirements, the forms that are used, that's from PP14 now, amongst others. The processes that take place within the county governments, how they receive their applications, how they invoice, how they circulate. And then you also require to have the post-approval. And I think that this is where also NCA comes very strongly. And something that needs also to be looked into in our laws is post-occupation. This has not been explored extensively. We need to have it looked into so that for every development that is coming up, and most developments, we put them and they outlive us. We need to know how do they perform. In terms of the element of multi-agency or institutional responsibility, this spans across both public and private sector. In the private sector, we have the ministries, departments, and agencies of the national government. We have the commissions like the National Land Commission that deals with matters of public land. Within the county governments, we have the sectors, or they call them departments. We have directorates and utility companies that deal with services such as water, sewerage reticulation, amongst others. In the private sector, we have the professional associations. And here AAK stands out quite prominently for standing out in advocacy and pushing for good practices in the built environment. We have developers, we have the business community, neighborhood associations, all these put together, they have a stake in development control. Perhaps before we talk about automation, and automation is very key. If you need to carry out the initiative of automation, you need to put your house in order, because if you're in a mess, then you are automating a mess. Looking back, automation has been with us, but we need to look of all the manual processes that we've had, how have we been faring? And Kenya has been through difficult urban development challenges. And in those old days, a lot of mud was thrown to local authorities. They were least well empowered in terms of legal, administrative, and technical support for urban planning. And most of them could not be able to work properly. In terms of the very elements I've just spoken about, on the multidisciplinary approach, most of them were not very well endowed with professionals. We know most of them had just a town clerk's department, a municipal treasury, a municipal public health officer, and in some cases, a municipal engineer. Of all the 174 local authorities, less than 10 had the capacity, the technical capacity to have the right personnel to be able to run the second element that I've spoken about, the collaboration and coordination pillar, where within their own departments, they'll be able to carry out the delegated function of development control, because under the Repeal Physical Planning Act, policy was bestowed on the National Director of Physical Planning. And as per the Section 5 of that act, local authorities have been delegated to carry out development control. And for lack of the right professionals, things didn't work very well. Even for the 10 or less than 10 local authorities that had that capacity, and a good example was Nairobi, things didn't work out very well. And if I may give an example, in the early 70s, Nairobi had the 30-year strategy, the so-called metropolitan Nairobi metropolitan strategy that was done way back in the 70s. And this is one document that never saw the light of the day. The entire development control process was mutilated, and many things happened. Unfortunately, when we allow politicians to take or to hijack some of these long-term strategies, things that go beyond their horizon, the 5-year horizon that they're in office, they are not able to drive it properly. On matters of development control for Nairobi, there were 2 departments that actually were dealing with development control. There's a housing development department that had deviated, moving away from facilitating approved type plans, mostly in the what we call the eastlands part of Nairobi, and they became development control in quotes department. And that's why you have estates such as Dandora, Kayole, Mathare North being what they are. And I don't think we can give them any positive character out of lack of appropriate development control mechanisms. But we also had a department that was carrying out these processes very well, the city planning department. It was called the City Planning and Architecture Department then. Those processes, I can say, they had very good forms. They were well endowed with planners. They had architects. They had all-rounders who were able to carry out those processes. Unfortunately, for those areas where we had politics playing sway, some of the operational procedures were not followed, and to some extent, development control lost its value. In terms of multi-agency or institutional responsibility, again on policy, as I said, the national government was responsible through the Director of Physical Planning to do those policies, including those plans for urban centers, but not all of them. Not all local authorities, the 170 of them had local physical development plans to guide their urban development. So we can say the rain started beating our towns that long ago. And when local authorities lack that capacity to carry out development control, any developer would wake up one morning and do as they wish. Or some of the considerations that were done by the town clerks or the municipal managers or the municipal treasurers was just to allow development just because revenue was coming in. In terms of the buildings themselves, Wawero was just mentioned about the building code. We know very well the building code was anchored on the repealed Local Government Act. It was a very well done document. But we need not to play to the mistakes that happened when the Physical Planning Act was enacted way back 1996. For those of you who may recall, when the Physical Planning Act came into play, they came up with what was called the Physical Planning, Building and Development Control Rules of 1998. It was almost a replica of the building code, but it was a little bit weak. I don't think many planners, including myself, I came to learn of this much, much later. It was so weak, so that such that many people or many professionals and the institution thought the building code as it was sufficient. And we can see even now as we talk, it is still one document that is still being made a reference to in terms of the developments that we are going through. So that's one mistake we need not to repeat. I've just mentioned that because when PLUPA came into force, that's slightly over a year ago, the process of enacting regulations have been ongoing, and a number of regulations have been rolled out. And one of the areas that was being looked into was coming up with another set of regulations to guide the development of buildings. I would wish to say that the process of developing the new development, the new building code has been happening for many years. It's a very thorough document, it's very well done, and I think it should be adopted. And since development control is a multidisciplinary thing for planners and all the built environment practitioners, I think that's the document that should be adopted, much as it might require to be also anchored within PLUPA to ensure that it conforms with the provisions of Section 46 of PLUPA, which maybe quickly, if you could allow me, I would just quickly just mention which are very key. Section 46 says the purpose of a local physical development plan, number is zoning and urban renewal or redevelopment. Of course, when you're doing zoning, urban renewal, there are buildings that happen there. Number B is guiding and coordinating the development of infrastructure. NC also comes in there. C is regulating land use and land development. That is purely for planners. D is providing a framework for coordinating various sectoral agencies. That's the pillar I'm talking about. All sectoral agencies that are in the built environment. And then E is providing a framework for guiding, for guidelines on buildings and works development in the city, municipality, urban area, or smaller urban centers, including local centers and market centers. There are people who think that that very small local center, all what you need is just to have a lean-to, those Dukawala kind of things of development. PLUPA here says that there needs to be a framework, and I believe the new building code allows for everyone from the city all the way to the local center to be able to make reference to it. Now, first move forward. When the local governance systems failed, when the kanjos, as we call them, failed, we had a new governance system of devolution, where the multidisciplinary approach now is divided between the national government and the county governments. Under the national government, we have the legal notice 156 of 2019 that allows the cabinet secretary in charge of physical planning to plan and also approve strategic developments. And these strategic developments are clearly defined in these document. If I may just maybe highlight some of them. These include like all the roads, all the classified roads that we have in our urban and rural areas. We have things like special things like international airports. We have universities, all those things that are of strategic importance. Private airstrips, harbors and ports, national ports, regional ports, export processing zones, and so on and so forth, such that the cabinet secretary is able to develop policies on how to get those things, how they need to be developed. And of course, we have the SEZs that have been passed by law. And then you have the Director General, who is supposed to receive these development applications, process them, and approve them. And some of the special economic zones that we know of, including some of the recently approved, like Tatu City, amongst others, these fall under these strategic development. This is provided under Section 69 of PLUPA. Coming now to the county governments, they have been empowered to come up with policies at the county level and also at municipal level. You've heard of the county spatial plan. We've heard about the urban integrated urban development plans that define issues that need to be looked into, as I've mentioned under that section 46 of PLUPA. Now, the question has been, why are county governments not responsive enough? One of the excuses that we are going through unprecedented times in terms of devolution transition. Yes, we need to appreciate the first phase of devolution, that was from 2013 to 2017, is the same time that we're going through the second medium-term plan, where there were processes of ensuring that all the 47 county governments are in place. Now, during the medium-term plan, that is from the Vision 2030, we have a lot of efforts that are going to ensure that municipalities are going to take root. But I think many of us have a feeling that it is a very slow process. I don't know how many municipalities we are having running, including our capital city. I don't want to dwell into the details of what's happening. Recently, I saw Kisumu launched their urban plan, the integrated urban development plan. And I think these are a city we need to watch. How are they going to roll out to ensure that development control takes root, to ensure that all development applications are able to go through the rigorous processes of evaluation and proper approval. And those urbanizing counties, if I may mention Nairobi Metropolitan. Nairobi, of course, I need also mention Kiambu. Kiambu started off very well. And Kiambu, I may say that they embraced devolution. Kiambu has 12 sub-counties. And in every sub-county, there's a planner. And for those of you who've been making submissions or applications to Kiambu County, they are sub-county specific. So there's that element of devolution to ensure that those applications are handled at that level. The only reference that is made to the headquarters is where the powers that are bestowed on the county director of physical planning, that is provided under section 20 of the PLUPA, has the role of ensuring that there's compliance at those sub-county level and counter-checking to ensure that by the time they are taken to the county executive committee member, they receive the correct approval. And I need to mention here, there has been a lot of grumbling and misunderstanding because PLUPA says the approving authority is the county executive member. Maybe it's good to come out very clearly, and it's good for AAK to put out the emphasis a CEC member, much as they are provided for as the approving authority, they don't approve raw applications, if I may call them so. They approve a processed application. So this process application, if I may go back to the processes that I'd mentioned about, they are having the right procedures, right from the pre-application to pre-approval. We need to know at which point do you receive a development application, since we're having that devolution governance mechanism. My take is that the point of receiving an application should be at the municipality, and it should be processed at the municipality. So these municipalities need to be empowered to have all the professionals that are necessary to look at those applications at that level. But their approval needs to be coordinated by the county director. That is one office, by the county director. And this coordination comes in a way that after the county director is satisfied that everything has been done at the sub-county, then it would be good for the director also to consult the counterparts at that level, because all the departments also have directorates. If it is an application that has to do with, say, public health, the county director of planning has an obligation to ensure that the county director of public health is satisfied that that application at the municipal level has received the right scrutiny. If it is something to do with fire safety, and I believe every county should have, or the municipality, there should be a safety and a fire, maybe compliance director, that application should be circulated for that particular office to be satisfied. And at the county level, there should be a director who's ensuring that if there are municipalities, Kiambu has multiple municipalities. And I think it is not only Kiambu. I'll mention a few other counties after I make my statement about those counties that have to be very clear about that devolution and observance of ensuring that there's appropriate circulation, there's appropriate consultation. And at that point, this is something, is my personal view, that was missed out by Plupa. In the defunct local authorities, we used to have what we call the town planning committee. That was made of politicians. Nairobi and many counties have technical committees that is made by the various technical professionals who ensure that there's compliance, professional compliance. So at the county level, the director has an obligation to ensure that all the counterparts, all his counterparts, be it fire, be it roads, be it survey, be it land administration, they are satisfied that the applications that have been handled at their municipalities or the municipalities that is within the jurisdiction of that county is met. And that caucus or that technical committee generates minutes, and these minutes become the authority of approval. Just the way the minutes of the town planning committees of the defunct local authorities will be the authority of approval. It is now these minutes of this technical committee that is made up of these technical officers or at the directorate level. And maybe I need to mention here, these should not only be the directorates within the municipalities, excuse me. If there are agencies who are also being circulated to, for example, if an application has been circulated to Kenha or Kera, say of a petrol station, they also can have a representation in that committee to say, yes, we are satisfied that application that is passing on our highway, being a petrol station, it is having the right acceleration lanes, deceleration lanes, and so on and so forth. If that application has been circulated to NEMA on environmental matters, they also deserve to be invited in that technical meeting to say, yes, we're also satisfied. And those minutes become binding. The role of the CEC is to ratify or to approve those minutes. That's what I'm calling up. The role of a CEC is to deal with a processed matter. But the role of coordinating, ensuring circulation of an application, that is provided under PLUPA, Section 60. The role of the director is to ensure that the municipalities circulate or consult all the relevant bodies that are dealing with every particular application. Now, coming to where we are, because that's the ideal situation, are we ready for having this matter automated? I can say yes, if only we're able to have all those elements in place. But how can we be able to do that? My take is that we need to have what I may call a backbone system, and I'm glad that the National Director or the Cabinet Secretary of Lands and Physical Planning has been initiating this process. I know yesterday or today, and in the next couple of days, there's been an initiative to have a pre-launch demo of how a national land information system is going to work. Within that framework of the National Information Land System, it is my take that the National Director of Physical Planning or the Director General of Physical Planning should have what I may call a backbone system. And this backbone system should be such that it is an open source system that has shared services with all linked government systems and links. It can be with the Director of Survey. It can be with the system I already mentioned there of NCA, so that they're all, there's a way one can be able to link with them. And that backbone system, the Cabinet Secretary will be able to receive, or rather the Director General of the Physical Planning will be able to receive the strategic applications that I mentioned earlier, like the superhighway we are having crossing over the city. I don't know whether it was has been reflected in any planning policy document, or many other strategic installations or developments that are taking place all over the Republic, such that they're able to receive it and is also able to circulate it to the relevant ministries and departments before he gives it to the Cabinet Secretary for approval. So at the national level, that's what the Director General should be able to do. Going to the county level, we have 47 counties. There are those counties that are much more vibrant in terms of urban development matters. Nairobi is 100% developed, and I think it is ripe. Not only ripe, actually, it is overdue. And for Nairobi, with its 17 sub-counties, we know everything is processed at City Hall. Why shouldn't we have offices or development control offices in these 17 sub-counties where we have applications being handled at that level, all those sub-counties to be facilitated or to be capacitated to have the right professionals, so that everything is handled at that level and expeditiously. So at that sub-county level, after those applications are approved, and I would wish NMS would take this model, because that's the only way to go, because of the over 4 million inhabitants we're having here, and I believe in the next 5 or 10 years, the population of Nairobi is going to be even more than that. These demands are not going to abate. They are going to increase in large numbers. So these are mechanisms we need to have in place. So from the national backbone system, Nairobi can have its own system. Kiambu can also have its own system that is compatible to the national one. Machakos can have its system, and Kajiado can also have the same system. But these systems need to be standardized such that the national director will be able to have the standards and the requirements that are going to be followed. And if I may give an analogy of motor vehicles, we all have all sorts of motor vehicles on our roads, Nissans, German-made Mercedes and all that, but the driving is the same. The driving is the same. There are those who drive a lorry, there are those who drive a small vehicle, and I can say for Nairobi is a heavy commercial vehicle in as far as the burden of development control is concerned. If you look into Kiambu, it is yet another very heavily endowed county. It is 71% urbanized. So all these counties, they can have their own modules, but tied to the national one, to ensure that their processes, their policies are in conformity with the national policies and all other actors within the built environment development control operations. So this system should be able to be such that if, as a practitioner, I would like to make an application, be it a planning application or an architectural application, one can approach on one portal. Just so we go into eCitizen, and once you log in, you can go to the Department of Lands or to the Ministry of Lands. You can go for your driving license. You can go to your police and get a police abstract, and so on and so forth. So that when I log in as a planner, I can find all the 47 counties there, maybe as a drop-down menu, and I can select the county I want to go in. If it is Kiambu and I want to do an application in Thika, I can see a drop-down showing Thika sub-county, and I lodge my application there, knowing that's what's going to be processed. That's the kind of envisioning thing I'm talking about. In terms of making this process also faster, and now that we're having the regulations of PLUPA being rolled out for comment by all of us, you also need to make these applications easier by having things such as developments that can be easily be fast-tracked, like single dwelling units, simple subdivisions, by having class orders, permitted development orders, such that if one is carrying out a perimeter wall or just carrying out an additional small bedroom or servant quarters, you don't have to go the painful process that architects and developers go through. That's how we're going to make it friendly for developers, really to appreciate what's happening. So we can say the opportunities now. And if we don't seize it now, our towns are not going to get any character. Our towns or developers and residents are not going to have a good places to operate from. Since my time is run out, I think I'd like to stop there to say, yes, we are good to go. We should be able to do that. But then it is upon the advocacy bodies, AAK and others, to put pressure to county government to say that, to tell them that these things have been thrown to their doorsteps. It's upon them now to take the challenge. The laws are there. And for those separate government entities, NCA included, including some of these issues that are arising, the conflicts that are happening between NCA and counties, they can be sorted out by ensuring that there's one pillar of addressing those challenges. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Planner Gatimu, for a very elaborate discussion regarding the various statutes that are in place and the processes and the procedures and tools, and even taking us all the way to how those should then be applied to a system, and even highlighting how the county government should actually work in order to ensure that everything is coordinated. And thank you so much for highlighting this. And it's been a very, very informative session from you. I see quite a few questions have come in. So without much further ado, I'd like to quite quickly get into it. And first and foremost, I would like to start with Architect Ida Munano. Perhaps you could clarify for us which regulations that you were asking here, whether they have been launched, and do this include what the State Department of Housing had developed. Architect Ida Munano, maybe we'll give you a chance to ask it live as we proceed to another question. I'd like to then ask the first question to Architect Oeru, and this comes from an anonymous attendee. He says that, why is it that in as much as we want to have this development control being effected, not devise a mechanism in the counties that takes into account employing trained staff that really understand the professional ethics required in the built environment? It disappoints at times when you try to submit application in the counties being handled by staff who are unprofessional and lack professional ethics. Architect Weru, maybe you could attempt to respond to this, even as we try and get Architect Munano live. Thank you.
Thank you, Florence. Let me also say thank you to Bwana Gatimo for giving us a masterclass in planning and the procedural aspects of planning. There are very, very, very many nuanced things he has said there, which we must all refer to, because a component of our discussion today is development control. So it is as heavy or as light as he said, and I'm sure he could speak for another week without finishing. Let me address Architect Munano's question, and I hope she's listening, because Architect Munano is a former PS, Housing and Urban Development, I believe a former chief architect, and so she knows a lot about these things and their background. So her question is very clear to me, and the answer is yes. The answer is yes, and I don't know if she's there, and I don't know if you can all see me, but if you recognize this document, you'll see 2009 somewhere down there. It's the basis of what we're doing right now. It's the basis of what the State Department of Public Works is looking at. So that document, which was done as National Building Regulations in 2009 by Housing and Urban Development then, is a document that's been updated via consultation with stakeholders end of 2019 and into 2020. I will speak a little bit about it just to clarify where it's at. The document went through various stakeholder consultations in early 2020, and then was submitted by NCA to the Office of the Attorney General for legal drafting. Once that process is completed, it had been hoped that in the calendar year 2020, that process would be complete. The document would then be subjected to public participation or stakeholder engagement, yourselves and the public and in the counties. The document would be socialized across the country for comments and inputs, and that's in line with the Statutory Instruments Act 2013. And once all of those stakeholder inputs are taken on board and the public participation requirements of the law are met, the document would then go back to the AG's office for final drafting before being tabled in the National Assembly. All regulations, soft law produced under any act of parliament are subjected to approval by the National Assembly. So in short, the document is still in the AG's office, legal drafting. Once that is done, the document will be subject to public participation, stakeholder engagement, in line with Statutory Instruments Act. And then, so there's still some steps to go. I'm saying that because it should not be, or I should not be misunderstood. The NCA Act as modified puts NCA in charge of implementation of enforcement of the National Building Code. The minister is empowered, or the CS is empowered, to create regulations under Section 42, and that National Building Code will come as regulations under the NCA Act. But the National Building Code is not yet ready. It is not yet out there. It has not been gazetted, so it is not yet a legal instrument. We are still using the building code that we knew before. I hope that clarifies a few of the questions I've seen. Now, I wanted to say a little bit about matters to do with capacity, to do with, let me just say broadly, whole of government approach. NCA must, of course, and will, of course, have to work with the county governments. NCA already works with county governments. I mean, national government and county governments already work together across many platforms. It will never be the sole responsibility of NCA to ensure that development control happens and happens effectively. So I think you can take that for granted, that of course they'll have to work together. There should be no duplication of roles. What needs to happen, of course, is we need to clarify some things. If you listen to Bwanagatima as he began speaking, a lot of what has happened in Kenya is that we all exist in silos, in towers that don't speak to each other. Bwanagatima has talked about PLUPA, Physical and Land Use Planning Act of 2019. It has Section 46, which says what it says. And yet here we are discussing NCA Act and revised NCA Act and Building Code. So the two levels of government must speak to each other, and I'm sure it will be resolved. The Building Code is a direction from the cabinet, national government. So how we work together will be resolved, I'm sure, once it comes down to those of us who are who are put in charge of implementation of government policy. When I say whole of government, I mean exactly that, and I'm sure you'll have heard the head of state speak about it. And it's happening across all sorts of agencies. You see it in security, you see it in health. I think that's the spirit with which these new regulations will be implemented. On matters electronic, because I believe that is a component of what we're discussing today, there are key platforms that, of course, would be necessary for us to get out of the silos. Bonagatim has mentioned some. We've been, from 10 years ago, we've done the construction permit management systems across several counties. You would hope that more counties would develop equivalent systems. For me, what I think should be the way going forward, when we started discussing it in Nairobi, 2009, 2010, it was really sort of far out there. It was edge of the earth. Nobody thought it would happen. And then a system developed, and then Mombasa came on board. Now, in my opinion, I don't think we should have 47 separate systems. It is time we sat down, stakeholders, AAK, advocacy groups, business membership organizations. You're not just advocacy, you have a complete right to be in this discussion. Those of us who are in government, what is an even system, even with regional differences? What is a common platform that we can adopt, discuss? Where's a concept paper? I've heard Bonagatimo talk about the cabinet secretary lands developing or discussing development of a particular system. Let me say this, I know in NCA, because as I said, we have a mandate to oversee construction or oversee the construction industry. We've also been discussing in the current financial year, not just discussing the current financial year, we've discussed in the past, and we do have an allocation in the current financial year for development of a construction industry information system. There's a budget line, it's not enough. We are waiting on a few other things to fall in place. But there is a concept paper. Now, that's an internal document still. So perhaps there's still a level of dissonance, even in national government. What needs to happen is BMOs like yourselves, AAK, get together with everybody else, get together with KIP. Let's reduce the silos, let's talk to each other, let's reduce the noise between us, because if something is happening in one ministry, it is also happening in an agency of another ministry, then we could be at cross purposes. And so I think there's room for us to do better. There's a lot of stuff that has happened that is positive, but there's room for us to do a lot better. When I talk about cooperation between NCA or national government and county governments, it's cooperation between NCA at development control level, it's the officers on the ground. When the enforcement officer from county government of Kiambu goes on the ground, he'll meet the compliance officer from NCA on the ground. Yes, they do have different mandates, but really we're checking on the same building, we're checking on the same things. We're doing QA. Those working relationships still need to be smoothed out, but we need to fight, because what I can say with all truthfulness is none of us have adequate capacity. We all struggle. So again, it's working out areas of cooperation and how to be efficient rather than competitive or other non-useful use of our energies. Let me stop there for now and maybe focus a bit more on the questions that are being asked. Thank you, Florence. Have I answered your question, Florence? Have I answered some of the questions?
Thank you so much, Rory. You've answered quite a number of questions. Just there's that element of the use of professionals, in county governments to ensure that, like for like, if an architect makes a presentation to another architect from the other side, they're able to discuss well. But there's the issue of either understaffing or something different is happening at the county levels, and we've already received that question. Are you able to speak a little bit about that?
Yes, I can speak to that. That's a healthy question. It's a healthy discussion, but it's also not a very new discussion. A lot of it comes down to how do we resource ourselves? How much in the way of human resource can NCA, for example, deploy? Can a county government deploy? Nca gave a very good history of what we had as local governments and what sort of staffing they had in various departments. He discussed what they achieved in county government of Kiambu. It's not mirrored across the country. But remember, each county government decides what staff it will hire, at what level of competence, and so on and so forth. A long time ago, when I was still very young in AAK, I can remember Plana Mairura and many others who are ahead of me making concerted efforts to get the Minister for Local Government to ensure that there is a planner in each of the 174, 175 local authorities to make sure that the Office of Chief Engineer is staffed by a qualified engineer, not just have the tag on the door, to make sure that anybody who's an architect, yourself, myself, are submitting plans to somebody who's able to correctly read them and interpret them. Let's say it's progressive. We could do better, of course, and perhaps it should be part of the focus discussions going forward, because again, like Gatimo said, if you take rubbish and automate it, you get rubbish out the other end, for a fact. That's not new, and I'm not ashamed to say that, because we've seen it in Kenya. If there's no will to do the correct thing, then it doesn't matter how much money you throw at it, you'll get rubbish out the other end. So that's with regard to resources. There's not much more one can say. I mean, I completely understand. I have submitted plans for many years. We all have. Who looks at them is not our choice. It is the politician, the CEO, the government at that level to determine we want competent persons inspecting our plans, and therefore ensuring that the basis of development control on the ground is correct ab initio. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roeru, for giving us your thoughts on that. And I'm glad to hear that it's not a new discussion. It's something that is has happened before. I think obviously in the new dispensation where counties have, some autonomy in how they do their hiring, then we may have to do a little bit more advocacy to ensure that the right people are in the right places. So thank you for that challenge. I'll now move some questions to Plana Gatimu, and I'll combine a few questions. We have a question from Koigi Kahuria and an attendee who goes by a long number, I won't say it. But what he's asking generally is kindly elaborate further on the best process for a multidisciplinary agency, task force, or institutional responsibility to assist in having effective development control. And I linked this to another question, the second question, where they're saying, at what point do the NCA inspectors and county officers make sure that their jobs are not duplicated, so that there's a seamless way in which the efforts of both NCA and the county are actually handled in a way that there's no duplicity, but there's effectiveness in development control. Thank you.
Thank you very much. On the first question on elaborating on the multidisciplinary, let me respond by saying that when an application is lodged, be it a planning or an architectural or an engineering application, it is one application, but it has to be vetted by various people. Let me give an example. A shopping mall. One is putting up a 1,000 square meter shopping mall, and it's been submitted to a municipality or a certain sub-county A. When it is received at this sub-county, you have to bring in someone to do the invoicing. And that invoicing must be related to an approved charging system that has been approved. So here you're bringing in someone from the finance department to ensure that the right amount is charged. There are mutual suspicions that normally happen within these institutions, where the department in charge of revenue collection must be satisfied that every county service that is offered, including planning services, are properly invoiced and paid for. So there you are having someone who you have to bring on board. Under the provisions of Section 60 of PLUPA, you have to circulate this development to various agencies. Being a shopping mall, you need to take it to all the agencies that are listed, all the relevant agencies that are listed under Section 60. And since I have the act with me here, I can just read them very quickly. As you do so, you need to be mindful that the law also provides that this has to be done within a specific timeline. We have land survey, we have the roads and transport. For land survey, if one is putting that shopping mall, say on a 5-acre piece of land, you need to circulate it to the land survey department or section to ensure that whatever is coming up is coming within the confines of the surveyed land. Road and transport, there has to be an evaluation to ensure that the traffic management, the access to that particular shopping mall is well taken care of. We have agriculture and livestock. This may not apply for an urban development structure. We have the health. There are so many public health issues that need to be looked into: ventilation, ablution facilities, amongst others. Public works and utilities. Yes, there are those things that are utilities that are done that need to be connected. If it is water supply, if it is a sewerage reticulation connection, environmental, urban development, and so on and so forth. So this is where we are saying this multidisciplinary has to be done at the lowest level and ensure that within the 60 days that PLUPA provides for these applications to be handled, it comes out well. And having it automated, the good thing about having it automated is that when it is submitted, it can be circulated simultaneously, real time. Unlike the manual system where you have to take an application from one station to another, it becomes an online one-stop shop, so to speak. On the question of how do you ensure that NCA and county government officers do not, that's a very good question. For any development, if there's any evaluation that has to be done, it has to be done by an architect, even if it's a very simple development, a 2 or 3 bedroom house. So I think this is where NCA and county governments or the National Director of Physical Planning as the one mandated to coordinate these functions, development control functions, as provided for under Section 55, is to ensure that if an application is put in within that sub-county, if it is the NCA that is endowed by having the right professional or the architect, there's no need of that municipality or county having to employ an architect to look or to evaluate a development application of a building, because NCA is present. So the best thing is to do is circulate it there. If it comes to inspections, if it is the NCA that is endowed with the right manpower of carrying out inspections, let them do the inspections. And as Waweru was mentioned, if they are coming up with a construction industry management system, they can have a system where the contractors who are listed, they also have the internal mechanisms of ensuring that if it is concreting they are doing, there's a mechanism they need to handle that concrete, including having it tested, having it, to ensure that it is properly cured. If it is anything to do with the, say, reinforcement bars, there's a way they need to record maybe on some log forms that are going to be with them and to be inspected by NCA to ensure that they are the right bars, of the right quality, and so on and so forth. So, and as Architect Waweru has said, I think this is where now the county government and NCA need to sit together and say, we are well endowed in this kind of manpower and procedures and processes. If you receive the application, circulate it. PLUPA says an application should be referred to relevant authorities. That is provided for in law. And I had mentioned earlier, NCA on their own, and I will put it very clearly, they cannot even issue an occupation permit or certificate. This is yet another process where you have to bring all the actors who have participated in the approval of that particular development, in the inspection, the progressive inspections of that particular development, and at the end of that journey, they all have to sit down and do what we call the final inspection, and they can say, yes, I am satisfied on my part, and they can endorse a certificate, but one certificate has to be issued by the office of the county director, ensuring that all the other ones have given their consensus that it has met their part of the contribution in ensuring that it is compliant. On the part of enforcement, these are very important area that, as well was mentioned, where you find a county officer comes to look into enforcement. And for information, you'll find maybe even 2 or 3 guys come. A public health inspector, an askari comes in there. I think we need to have a very elaborate inspection mechanism. If it is something to do with a building, if it is NCA that is endowed or mandated, let it be done by NCA. If it is on land subdivisions that have to do with ensuring that there's compliance in terms of land subdivision or land uses, let planners have their mechanisms. And I'm glad the planning handbook and other processes pertaining to land processes are under development, further to streamline this development control intervention. That is very important. On matters to do with dispute resolutions, more often you find these matters find their way in the judiciary, in the courts. PLUP also provides for liaison committees, even at the county level. I think we need to take advantage of these liaison committees because they are populated with the right personnel and who are well conversant with the issues that can be resolved at that level. And we need to remove that burden from our judiciary and get them solved as much as possible under these forums of the liaison committees. I think I've responded to Koigi's question and the other numbered person, unnamed person. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. And allow me to stay on you now that we are on you. And what I'd like to ask, and I have a question, 3 questions actually from Joel Oyuga, from Engineer Shama Kiteme and Architect Julius Kibwage. And their questions lean on the fact that development has gone ahead of planning. And how can we ensure that, you know, what can we do? For instance, we see here Julius Kibage talking about an explosion of unorganized markets, unplanned villages and town centers, truck shops along our transport corridors, and these have obviously evolved into, you know, significant urban areas, and even reduce the quality of life that we should be seeing in those areas. And with this kind of unplanned you know, growth and unplanned development that you know, we cannot base it on any planning instruments that should be. How can we take control of this? Could you kindly just give your comments on this general feeling that a lot of development is going ahead of planning, and a lot of it is going, even you see here in Nairobi that a lot of the areas are growing and there are really no policies to govern some of those areas, even when it comes to things like even number of floors for some areas, the type of development. Some areas used to be largely and heavily agricultural, but now they're moving and becoming heavily residential and commercial. What happens to these areas? Bwana Planner, could you kindly make an attempt to respond to this? Thank you.
Thank you, thank you. You said that question is from who in particular? You mentioned three
there are 3 people.
Oyuga, Kiteme,
and Kibwage. Generally talking about similar. Yes.
Yeah, my take is that there are 2 ways of going about this. One way, the first way is first and foremost to have a mechanism of regularizing development that is already on the ground. And by regularizing is coming up with a mechanism to ensure that you carry out a proper mapping of those developments that may have not been subjected to planning processes to ensure that they're in compliance with all the laid down requirements. If it is a building, we know many Kenyans like putting their buildings beacon to beacon without setbacks. It can be a painful process, but if it is a building that requires to be trimmed down or to be knocked down or to be resized to ensure that it's in compliance, that has to happen. And I would like to say that there have been various attempts, especially in Nairobi, to carry out this regularization, but you find when you bend the rules to accommodate non-compliant developments, developers will always want to jump the gun and you know, carry out the development under the cover of darkness or under the cover of being aware out of the limelight, and then declare that they'd like it to be regularized, knowing very well it is not meeting those requirements. If some punitive measures are taken to ensure that any regularization is penalized, and if it also requires to be demolished or to be resized for compliance, that is one. Number two, to ensure that development does not move faster than planning. I mentioned earlier, we need to devolve this function. And I gave a very good example of Nairobi. If today you have the sub-county of, say, Mihango, I can tell you this is an office that can be inundated with a lot of development applications in terms of processing applications. I believe there are thousands at any one time developments taking place in Mihango. I've just taken that as an example. You go to Kahawayondani on the side of Kiambu, there must be hundreds of developments taking place at any one time or another. So having those offices at that sub-county level will be able to contain, to ensure that we don't have developments coming up without approval. And for all the ones which are coming up, there's sufficient inspection to ensure that there's compliance at all levels. It is at all order, but it is possible. But also on the other hand, we also need to cushion our professionals from political interference, because you'll find some of these developments have some political interference. If you serve an enforcement notice and you are adamant, you find either an MCA or a politician coming to intervene to say, no, this is my person, don't touch on that kind of development. So those are some of the things we need to explore. If these guys are called out that you are protecting a wrong development, it is corruption in one way or another. So that's how I believe you can be able to counter, by mapping out and regularizing, ensuring there's compliance, and trying to put planning ahead to ensure that whatever is happening in any area, and if you're having any sub-county that is having pressure, put in more staff to cope with the pressures that are coming up there. So you need to monitor how are the development trends, or even move around your officers. If a certain sub-county is facing some challenges of non-compliance, move in there and have an operation to ensure that those kind of errant developments do not take place. If that is not going to be looked into, then it's going to be the norm for a long time to come.
Thank you so much, Planner Gatimu, for elaborating on that. And even as we have been listening to you, Architect Waweru has been making quite a few responses on the Q&A, and he's made headway with a lot of it. And so I want to ask one last question, as we are not able to respond to all the questions that you have, but what we will do, we will keep a copy of the questions and share with the speakers, and we'll request them to follow up with some commentary on the questions and share those with you as we wind up this particular session. And at this point, I just want to ask Architect Waweru, in finality, regarding the role, there are many emerging professions that are coming up, within our industry. And Architect Imran here asks us, what role should counties have in the post-contract management of projects? He mentioned that in the introduction that there has been an amendment of the Nca Act that empowers the authority to implement the building code. And that is a good one. But what I really want to ask is, we have emerging professions. For instance, now we have the profession of construction project managers, and we've even seen somebody asking what the role of a QS is there. I know you've answered this on the Q&A, but could you kindly elaborate the role of all the professionals when it comes to registering a project with Nca, and what do you foresee in terms of emerging professions that we are beginning to see, such as the project manager, and so on and so forth. And when you finish the questions, kindly do give your closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Florence, and thank you for the questions. First of all, as you correctly say, perhaps we wouldn't be able to answer everything today. These are long discussions, but it's good that we should approach them. To answer your direct question, firstly, a registered person, of course, is fairly important, because then they are clearly defined in statute. So, an architect, a planner, an engineer, a QS, etc., etc. Those are fairly easy to deal with because that person is known, there's recourse to them, and so on and so forth. It does not mean that the other persons are not competent, that they have no role. Of course, they have a role. What we do in NCA is we require, and those of you who are in practice know that once a developer applies for a certificate of compliance, then each consultant, architect, engineer, QS receives an email from NCA asking them to accept the project, and by accepting the project, they're accepting to comply with all laws in built environment, Nca Act and others. They're accepting to comply with the NCA Code of Conduct, and so on and so forth. Now, if you, of course, have engaged a construction project manager, a landscape architect, and so on and so forth, of course, they're competent, of course, they have a job to do. Presently, they will not feature in the NCA requirement for compliance simply because those are not registered persons. But let me add this, we fully recognize them, and as I've replied in one of my answers, we as NCA have designed a new site construction board, and we've already approved that as a board, and we should start seeing it manifest so that we standardize what we are seeing as information out there. And those persons, of course, will appear there as they have done in the past. Their roles are exactly as they've been, they're competent, and so on and so forth. Now, I don't know if there's much more I can say with regards to that. A project manager will do his job and he'll appear on the signboard. He will do his job professionally. He may not, however, be subject of the NCA certificate of compliance per project. Does that answer you, Florence?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, it does answer. And I just wanted to highlight to everyone that, yes, that all the registered professionals, at least who are recognizable by law, are actually also recognizable by the system in NCA. So thank you very much for that. And even as we wind up, perhaps you could give us your closing remarks, and then Planner David will follow.
Okay. Let me say this. First of all, very happy that we are having these discussions, and webinars such as this, I think, perhaps more frequent, so that big questions, small questions, areas that are not clear are discussed. And with the options, the technology options we have today, many, many more people are able to participate, ask their questions, and that is enlightenment. So I'm extremely happy with that. So long may this sort of opportunity exist for all of us. But let me also say this is Kenya, siasa mbaya, maisha mbaya. A lot of the questions I have seen, which I was trying to leave for Gatimu because he's the planner, come down to the absence or the presence of political will. Why do people flout development control parameters? Why are we not a plan-led society? The question by Bwana Kibwage, and many other questions. Why do we just simply flout what is known to be the correct, why do we not adhere to what is a clear planning policy? That's a question for all of us to answer. It's a societal problem we face. Right now, I'm a regulator. Tomorrow, I may not be. What do I do in my practice as an architect? Do I do the correct thing? That is a responsibility for all of us. Let me say this here. Today, we are speaking to august persons. I presume we're all respectable, well-meaning professionals. That is a presumption we have. That is a presumption we have in AAK. Let me tell you the truth. We're not all good people. Many of us, architects, engineers, QSs, are gangsters. I can say this without fear of favor, without fear of retribution. You know, NCA did something last year. We simply went to our online project registration system. We checked, what are architects doing out there? What are QSs doing out there? What are engineers doing out there? There is no architect, there is no engineer, no QS who has any business lying to me, lying to us, lying to the profession, that they're able to supervise on site in one calendar year, 200 projects, 400 projects, 50 projects, So they're guns for hire. You know them, I can name them. They've been debarred by their boards before. I know Architect Muli is on this call, Chair of Borax. Some who have been suspended before and are back in practice are doing the same thing as we speak in January 2021. Basically, we must all look in the mirror, quit the pretense, ask ourselves what we want to do, and then do exactly that. We should not require policing. That is a basic premise of being a professional. For as long as we're not doing that, then Regulator Waweru, Planner Gatimo, in our various roles, and all of us out there will be fighting a losing battle. I am challenging all of us to lead and to lead correctly. Practice what you preach. Thank you very much, and thank you, AAK.
Thank you so much, Architect Waweru, for those words that really we must live up to our professional name. Planner Gatimo, I invite you to make your final remarks.
Thank you very much. First and foremost, I would like also to extend the message that has been put to Architect Waweru by saying that we need a societal change. We need our people to appreciate and understand what is planning, what is development matters. I've encountered personally situations where when carrying out planning, one asks you, why are you not giving me minimal road services? For example, if one is carrying out as a subdivision and require about 15 meters road, they insist on 6 meters. But when that development is fully developed, you find there are challenges of accommodating infrastructure, accommodating mobility challenges. It's good if you're able to go down to the community and tell them the value of proper planning, the value of good developments, buildings that have setbacks, buildings are well ventilated and well lit, not for monetary gains in short term, but buildings that are going to be livable and pleasant for everyone. At the professional level, I think we need to see more. We have practicing professionals, both in public and private. What they preach is not what they practice. I've seen a number of professionals, when given instructions by a client, instead of putting a rejoinder if a client is asking for something that is not appropriate, they say, I'm not going to lose this shilling or these bucks just for that, correction. So some of them will go to any full extent of allowing a bad development to happen. And this is what is compromising what we are saying. Our towns, our cities are not having any identity. So if we're able to up the game, educate the community, up our game in terms of professional practice, then we can say we are good to go, and our towns are going to have an identity, and it's going to be pleasant for everyone. Thank you.
Asante sana, Planner Gatimu and Architect Waweru for taking time to join us this evening. We know our time has stretched, and I thank all the participants for having been attentive and posted their questions. Indeed, this is literally just a tip of the iceberg. There's so much more that we can explore and discuss as a fraternity and to take us forward. And we promise you, as the Architects Chapter, we will have a sequel to this particular session, and we'll be tackling some of the questions that you have asked. I've seen quite a few questions regarding the system itself. So today we were not looking so much into the system. We just want to get an overall conversation on this particular thing. And we hope we'll be able to actually bring on board the county officers who are in charge of these systems, and we'll be able to hopefully be in conversation with them and ask those difficult questions regarding how, how our interaction with the system is going on. So I'd like to hand it over back to Architect George Arabu to close for us. Thank you very much, and I wish everyone a lovely evening.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. I hope you can hear me. I am having challenges with my systems here. But I would like to say to pass on a very grateful thank you to all the for the our two main speakers, because really this was a day where we were listening to you chat about these matters, and I think our members have gotten quite some good insight into the situation, especially from people who have handled the matter. And we are also very thankful also for the participation, because this is actually a heated topic. Just from looking at the information on the charts and the Q&A and the attendance in general, because this is something that touches all of us, and in such a way that without this stage, we know very well that it doesn't matter what you do pre-approval. The most critical thing is, of course, having to realize your dreams, having been regulated and approved to move on to the next stage. So as the chair said, this is not the end. We are going to follow up through with this, and we hope to have some of the even a more difficult and candid discussion, i.e. bringing in now the county officers. And I would also like to say thank you for the secretariat for putting together this. I know, sometimes we have to do these things in a rush. People just came back from holidays and in January, and we had to set up these things in a half. But what is important is that most of our members are very receptive, and it's a topic that we couldn't wait any longer. Given, of course, the launch of Kajiado, and we know most of you are also having some challenges trying to sign up onto that system. I would also like to say that, of course, moving forward, this is a very important year for us. There's some transitioning later this month, then next month. Now calling out to our members who are here to attend the various AGMs and mass. I think earlier on we had our secretary on the call. Sorry about. I think we might have lost him at some point. I wanted him to say something, but I would like to say now this would be the closing for today. Please feel free, write an email, call us, and we should continue this discussion. I'd like to wish you a good evening, and see you next time. Bye bye to everyone. You can switch on your videos for the speakers, and please wave to our audience as you exit.
Thank
Bye,
you, Arabu. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you, Kwari.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.